All right, I'm glad to see you all. It's Tuesday, 3rd of May. It's 10:01 p.m. Moscow and Kiev time. We're meeting Olexiy Arestovych again. Glad to see you, Olexiy. I'm joyfully delighted to see you all here. We have 150,000 watching us live. Please post links to that cast in your social media and other groups and help us promote this cast as much as you can. At least I'll watch it recorded. Subscribe to Feygin Live and to Olexiy Arestovych, and if you're watching that in English, please subscribe to Privateer Station. Do not forget to like it. That helps YouTube to promote the video. All right. So again, let's go to our discussion. How about the news on the fronts? There is nothing there. No news. Tell us exactly where there are no news. Nowhere, nothing. I mean, there are small things. We stopped a few attacks, won a few skirmishes, got some prisoners. Sounds horrible for the civilians who dramatize every explosion and shot, but for the military it's routine. On the military report, it sounds like the forces are regrouping. To translate to human language, we got our ass kicked, now we're standing and thinking what else to do. Maybe throw tanks there, maybe something else, and the leaders are bent over the maps, pretending they're figuring out what to do. Can you tell us more about those details we stopped at yesterday about the radio intercepts? That, I think, SBU, Ukraine Security Service is doing? Well, it's a mix. It's not just them. I'd call it public effort. For example, one of them, a battle with a tank detachment, 60 soldiers killed, and then they talk, and they discuss and go into details, and then the lower ranking officers talk about their suspicion that their command wants to just destroy them. Next one, detachment of the 20th Army, 180 people get surrounded. In one of the settlements, request for resupply, did not get any. They break out due to their command officer, who stayed in place and covered their retreat. Out of 80, it was 80 people who got surrendered. Out of 80, 19 managed to escape, and one armored vehicle. That's the area where they presumably advance. Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, just like the Russian command is reporting, gloriful tread to the ocean. Russian propaganda continues that there are notions that they're advancing, but in reality, a lot of 300s wounded, 200s dead, and their advance halted, and they rolled back. Another side of the front is reporting that they have about 80% of their personnel destroyed, with 20 left. They request withdrawal and reinforcement. Marines and Abkhazia Brigade, and another one who refused to go into the operation. They were still thrown, and they're not too active there, but they managed to maintain their coherent state, and they have not lost many people. But their commanders, we're listening to them, commanders are arguing and complaining that their soldiers are sleeping while on clock or an outpost on the watch. So they're tired. Another one complaining that soldiers quarreled in the armored vehicle, screams, fighting, the explosion of a grenade, and when we look inside, they're all dead. So they argued till one of them blew them up. Yeah, one of them just pulled the pin on the grenade and killed everybody. This is the moral condition of the Russian troops that are supposedly continuing their advancement movement. So what you read Does it imply that Gerasimov, the head of the command, might have been there to actually go and inspect because of there's an issue? Usually the visit of that high-level ranking officer happens on two reasons. One is when the highest command pushed them out, kicked them out, and requested to go there and do something. And second is when they get a cumulative report of all these little tricks that come in, and it raises an eyebrow to go and figure out, to understand what is going on at the front. Because however you report, that stone flour is not coming out, following that pretty dirty Russian joke. So on the reports, they're pushing the damned Ukrainians and winning, but the radio intercepts are telling a very, very different story. And it's different levels, not just the lower ranking officers, also generals, also the colonels, each of them on their own level, but the general mood is a lengthy and heavy frustration of what's happening. Do they see yet that they're losing the war? No, they do not see them losing, but they're really concerned. What are they doing here? Why they were sent? These are like defeatist moods that usually you can get executed about that if you say it out loud. In Russian army, yeah, but it's the phase preceding the phase when they realize that they're losing. So they're still trying to advance, they're still making some movements, but it'll take some time before they get there. I actually, while answering a few questions, got an idea today. That's, sometimes it's good to ask questions, and that's why investigators very often work in couples, in pairs, because while one is asking questions, the other has a little bit of time to think and correct. So, as I'm discussing with friends about it, I catch myself thinking that the way Russian army behaves might indicate that Russian command has a plan. It may be painful for Russian mothers, but it has some logic. How describe that? They understand that we're aggregating Western military resources. So why do they continue throwing more and more people into the fire, including the declassified, bombs and all? Because their task is not to let us accumulate reserves at this stage to a volume, a level that will allow us to actually switch to an advancement mode. This is like an old math task about a swimming pool with two incoming and outbound water tubes, water pipes, that they need to make sure there is enough water going out of the pool to prevent it from overflowing. And of course, they basically have to throw more resources in the fight, so we have to throw more resources in the fight because we don't want to let our current troops holding the line be demolished. So they're providing that constant pressure, so we would not be able to do the proper rotation, so we have to throw more equipment and hopefully lose it in the fight. So little portions, because that support from the West, it doesn't come 800 tanks at a time. It comes in smaller shares, smaller portions. So they keep pushing to make sure that we keep putting that in fight. In this concrete situation, it does make sense, given their resources and given our resources, but it's a cannibal tactic in relation to Russian troops. Well, and you're speaking it out loud. Well, one of my tasks is to try to dispel it, to show it what they're doing to the Russian citizens and mothers of those soldiers, that they're finishing Ukrainian resources and ammo by sending their troops continuously into the fight. They're basically sending kids, fathers, and grandfathers to make sure that their weapons get depleted before they can accumulate enough for the advancement or counterattack. 360,000 people watching us. This is an interesting idea. As a reminder to the newly joined ones, do not forget the links. Please share. Let's go next to Mariupol. I've been listening to some intel that Russian side is trying to advance again, that they're attacking the humanitarian corridors. What do we know? Is it true that there is an attack on Azovstal with the forces of local Russian forces, local Russian brigades? They're shooting from artillery and tanks, a bit of aviation, and they tried to storm. They tried? Yeah, they tried. Not quite successful. Thing is, not all civilians are evacuated, but Russians already tried to storm the place. They just cannot, seems like they cannot do it any other way. And even those that left yesterday, the civilians, it took them about a day to get to the safe place because they had to go through some pre-agreed filtration camps. Did you see that asshole Solovyov, Russian propagandist, put the helmet on and, actor, trying to walk in the factory? I saw him, it seemed like they sent him on purpose to Mariupol to shoot a video or something. Yeah, they're on the Ilyich plant where our Marines were holding defense before they broke out and joined Azovstal. I think what's happening, they sent him to that plant because he'd be in a factory. Russians have no idea about the difference between Azovstal or Ilyich plant or any other factory in the city. So they would see him in the factory walking and talking. They'd probably get a picture that, oh, that factory has surrendered or was taken. So that's part of an illusion of victory. That means probably that they're trying to sell the victory they already have, which is kind of good. Imagine the situation if he lost there and somehow Azov detachment got a hold of him and snuck him out to Azovstal. That would be an amazing story. Yeah, that would have been too good to be true, as we call. But you could actually shoot miniseries about that pig. But okay. Let's talk about the mobilization perspective. I'm skeptical about this story, but CNN, referring to the intel sources, keeps repeating that Putin on the 9th of May might announce the war officially and start the general mobilization of all the Russian men. I repeat, I'm still skeptical because that situation is poorly manageable. Maybe listening to us, they'll try to manage it better, but as one of my sources said, maybe it would help them to get the reservists who possibly would refuse to go otherwise, but if you claim that it's war, you could actually grab them and bring them to the battlefront and make operators, radio people, and so on, and shooters and fighters. And for that, maybe they need to announce a general mobilization. But me knowing that group in power in Russia, I am skeptical. Because there is a political side to such an action. What's your opinion on this? Maybe you have a different kind of information in Ukraine in your sources. Well, first of all, they already are conducting partial mobilization. They are trying to get more reservists to the front. On one hand, they're trying to scare them of the repercussions if they don't show up. On the other, they're promising better paid contracts. So what are we talking about? How many people? Maybe 10 or 20,000 people. And they're volunteers. And again, we can talk about their quality. Some of them know nothing. Others have actually served and know some things. Now they'll throw them with the old equipment, and it will likely be similar to our army back in 2014 when Russia tried to pull that thing with DNR and LNR. That's what our army was like. We basically dusted off the old equipment, tried to change the wheels or other things that were not working, put people on them, and went to war. Not too effective, but we actually managed to fight and achieve certain results. So they can continue doing the same thing, and as I said before, that would fit in the theory that they're trying to prevent us from aggregating more forces. They don't have. I don't think they have a longer-term picture, but short-term strategy, that's good enough for them. And they'll have about maybe 20,000 people on the old equipment, and maybe also the draft that they wanted to have 130,000 this year. It's not too critical. I mean, they can gather 50,000 if you give them a few months, but the quality of these detachments will be much lower, not the ones that they lost at the beginning of this war. They'll be much less battle ready. They'll be conscripts that are being drafted in the 1st of April, and they'll be much less ready because it takes time to train them and make sure they know how to interact with their colleagues, and it usually at least would take 4 months, maybe 2 months in a military time frame, but they'll be trained so poorly that they'll have old armored vehicles, old AKs, and I can even say a scary thing, they might even throw them under Kiev again, but their destiny is going to be the same. You know, we destroyed the elite forces before, and now they would have, they'd be throwing new people on the same positions. We already know the front, we know the strongholds, the geography. We have kicked ass for the previously deployed, much more professional troops, and now there'll be new ones coming in. Remember how I said, don't do that because you'll have 10 more thousand dead people, and they still did it, so that's the second cycle they're going through now, which is kind of running out now. And it seems that they are getting ready to start the third cycle with the old rusty equipment and some barely trained troops. So the rest will depend upon how much warfighting capability will we retain and how soon the Western support will come. One thing is, if we do not have time to prepare and they keep pushing, they might continue with the same advancement as happened back at the beginning of the war. And another one when we have enough power to stop them and continue with positional war. And a third, if we actually manage to aggregate more resources and then we can try to counterattack. But I see that Putin's regime will try to continue doing that in waves until the Russian male population that is more or less suitable for war will be entirely depleted, because the party of war seems to have won in Russia. And I'm just saying again that Putin might be a Chinese or American spy, because only a person who is doing it with true love or maybe for big money on a special assignment to destroy the male population and the future amount of people living in Russia. And they're losing, they've lost 20,000, they'll lose 10 more now, they'll lose more after. And regardless of all that effort, the West and Ukraine will still win because Russian economy cannot stand long-term against the Western lend-lease. Do you think in the Central Command of Russia they realize that they don't have quality? They get meat, but they don't get quality. Ukraine is getting quality. It also kind of is escalating things because mobilization is closing the borders, and many Russians don't get it that they're smiling and saying, "I'll pay money and will not go to the front." But if they close the borders, and they will have to, you cannot leave to Turkey, you cannot go anywhere else, and from 18 to 55, everybody is eligible to be drafted. All of a sudden, it becomes very stuffy in the room, and oh, what's happening? I wanted to go to Mongolia on a business trip, and you are prohibiting me, you're not letting me and taking me to the front. I needed to go there because of my work. I bring goods and, we're under sanctions, so somebody needs to do that. And how can I live if you draft me? And how can I feed my family if you draft me? So it also has a social burden that general population might not be able to sustain, especially in the situation with sanctions and lower of incomes. Do you think that, however, will lower the heat in the thermonuclear war club? Maybe they decide that they'll throw either bomb or meat, and if they're throwing meat, they don't need bomb. I don't think it closes this risk, but it might push it further out, because you don't want to do it together. Although maybe could be a different logic here, that they would use a tactical nuke and then you need mobilization to oppose NATO and other resources who might be thrown after such an event. I want to say another part of that story, that getting off the couch is painful, because in Ukraine we went through two major drafts in the first war, and the 17th was a big draft, and there was one recently with this war. It reflects pretty painfully on the society, and I want to say even our government cannot do a high-quality draft, but take Russian government, and if you take the faraway regions, because it's not like Moscow where Russian guard or police can visit every home and check who's there. And then imagine some faraway Siberian city where there may be like the head of police, the head of KGB, the head of military, maybe 15 functionaries against 150,000 people in the city. And they try to force people to go? There's a reason why all the military conscription sites, or many of them, are being burned in Russia. I actually have tons of pictures when they're being burned. And people are leaving a graffiti with the letter L, Legion, somewhere next to it. So I'm getting a lot of materials. They're sending different posters and other things they're doing in cities. Very often they write Free Russia. Very often they just put an L for Legion. It's a blue with white stripes. That's an interesting story that's started rolling. That might be really upsetting for the Russian administration. People that were trampled upon are starting to rise. That's what I'm saying. Let's do the conscription, mass mobilization, give everybody weapons, and we'll see what that legion will do. Yeah, legionnaires will be among the mobilized, among the drafted. But in any case, mobilization is a big shake for society. It'll split into two halves. One will be screaming, "Yay, let's go kill all the enemies," and the other part, the bigger part, probably will be screaming that, "No, we have not agreed about that." And they'll not be saying it like this. They'll likely be using a lot of swear words. all of a sudden, yeah, these people might officially start believing those videos that Ukraine soldiers are posting, and they'll have to wait the probability of actually being burnt alive in the vehicle or being shot, and many of them would want to, not be there in the battle. And those people who are now watching from Russia and saying, "Oh yeah, it's probably Ukrainians propaganda and stuff," but if you're drafted, you probably start considering that, oh shit, maybe it is true, even if it's partly true. That's scary. So they start flipping through the Telegram channels and seeing more and more pictures of what's happening here. War is pretty rough here. Usually a detachment, after it comes to Ukraine in a week, it loses about 40 to 50% of their manpower, especially in the direction of the main strike. And you'll be, wearing the dress of 1940s, in the helmets of 50s, with weapons of 60s, and against you it'll be NATO weapons of 2000s. 400,000+ people watching us. Thankful to everybody who are spending their time with us. Please, again, share. Do not forget. I don't want to call names, but I want to say that since these stories about humanitarian aid keep popping up, I'd want you to say what is being done to resolve issues. I don't want somebody to be parasitical on this subject, but since people are asking, I want to ask you and tell us if there is any work, if there is really an issue with people selling humanitarian aid, stealing it. That appears to be an informational operation, and it started from the very beginning. It works to support Russian narrative, and it also helps Ukrainian opposition, because what's surprisingly or not, some of that opposition is very well matching with or coordinating with the Russian point of view. So we have an integrated team that is researching that matter, that is reporting to the very, very top, and I have very close relation to that group. I want to say that out of 26 cases that we reviewed, that people complained about, this is real information, here's the phone, here's the address, not a single of them was actually confirmed, not a single one. And I do believe that perhaps there would be situations like this, and I might suspect the areas where they're happening. But I keep saying, please give us data. Send us info as to intel where such things are happening. We'll try to respond. Tag me on Facebook, on social media, and I will, I think most people know by now that I will actually at some point find time to go there and check the report. Even though my day is crazy, but eventually I'll get there. I'm trying to review all such cases. So just send the concrete data. Here's where they're stealing. Here's where they're storing. I promise you, in about an hour after that, there'll be police and special services, and there'll be inspections, and they'll be doing the check of the situation, because that's the very hard official position of the Ukrainian government. We do not condone such behavior. So again, if you're aware of these things, here's Olexiy Arestovych. You write to him, tag him in your post. Even if you don't get an answer, he will get to your text and to your message, and they'll go investigate that. And if you know the actual location where these things are happening, write the message, buy some chips, popcorn, beer, settle nearby and observe that place and see how soon the police will come or execute the criminals. Well, or not execute, or proper democracy, there'll be a legal investigation. Yes, legal investigation. So yesterday we talked about Lavrov, who could allow himself to behave like that with anti-Semitic statement. I had an impression that Israel wanted to somewhat smooth that problem, that issue. I remember there was Zakharova, the drinking idiot who was a deputy for Lavrov in Ministry of International Affairs, where she stated something about a president, one of the East European countries being too overly begging of some Western leaders, and there was a pushback, and even Lavrov and higher up reached out and said, well, don't mind her, she was maybe under influence or just not in a good mood when she posted that. So in this case, Russia came out of the blue towards Israel about Hitler being a Jew, supposedly, and they really kind of stuck it and turned it into Israel. And what do you think they would do? Do you think they might actually start supporting Ukraine? Would they start supporting some anti-air missile systems? I think Israel will always be caring first about their position in the Middle East. A small country that cares about their military might, very advanced, but still they're too small versus all of the neighbors who might not like them. And they're always facing different kinds of attacks, even by handmade little rockets from Lebanon or Gaza. So for them it's painful. They also have big issues with Iran. They're getting ready for a big regional war. They're always getting ready for that, but now it seems like Iran might start something, and Iran is the power that is allied with Russian powers. So Israel we're always surviving via political maneuvering, and this is basically another lever, so they're using all levers to try to manage their situation, and it just seems that they, regardless of all their actions, the situation is crumbling. And that statement by Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, out of the blue, hitting at a very emotional and painful sore that they have from the Second World War. They're basically growing the amount of people who want to go and fight, and really takes the argument out of hands people who were previously in the Russian camp and saying, hey, let's not fight, Russia is a big country. But you need to understand, Israel is a small country which actually fought United Soviet Union. They were shooting down Soviet jets and destroying Soviet tanks. So we should not think that they're not brave or not professional. Probably they're not. It is not needed for them yet. And the only thing is that maybe United States and Europe might put some pressure on them. And then they start calculating with Israeli interests in mind, but they're still calculating in such a big fight. Iran, Russia, and Syria versus the whole West world. Where would Israel be? But if you pose the question this way, you kind of know the answer. If you compare United States and Europe versus Syria, Iran, and Russia. And if it ends to that you need to react in a way that would be noticeable. I can suspect it may not be a direct action, could be through third parties. But I would not be surprised if we receive some support from Israel now. So I read today that Israel announced they'll be glad to receive some Ukrainian soldiers in their hospitals, and they're ready to give some of the defensive armaments to Ukraine. Again, defensive is a widely debated specification, and also I read that they allowed one of the Baltic countries to supply their weapons that they have from Israel to Ukraine if they want to do so. But this needs some checking. I just didn't have time, not because I'm just running out of time, too many things to do, so I'll need to check that and get back to you on this. If it is so, these moves are already pretty serious. What is interesting for us is there anything that Israel can give that other countries cannot, technologically or militarily? That Ukraine would really need and that NATO does not have. I need to say that Israel has a lot of things that NATO cannot give. We saw some of that in Karabakh War that Azerbaijan used. For example, some drones that are suicide drones, kamikaze drones. There are Americans ones like that, yeah, but Israel also has really good ones. And also there is a Spike, which is a long-distance, long-range, fly-by-wire anti-tank missile, which allows the shooter to change his mind in flight and target a different vehicle if something happened to the first. Some of them are very niche that can be used just in the Middle East, but the others, like Spike, can be used successfully here. I know Poland is using it too, so Israel has some good arguments to answer Lavrov's accusation and keep the balance in the Middle East. And again, they're solving part of their big solution to the Middle East problem is help from the United States. So I would say Israel needs to take care of the safety of Israelis, and they're in a much more difficult situation. On the one hand, it's paradoxical. They're one of the strongest countries in the Middle East, and on the other hand, they're pretty vulnerable. So first of all, they need to care about themselves. But if such architecture of care supposes that they can actually help some of our wounded troops or wounded children, this is already a great step that we'd really appreciate. And even if they're ready to supply some defense armaments, and they already said they'll give armored vests and helmets, we'll be very thankful for every single unit. And I've noticed that Israeli people are demanding something like that. Over 60%, according to some polls, are requesting Israeli government to engage more actively in this conflict on the side of Ukraine. If it is so, their military government does not need advertising and will be definitely glad to receive it. And if at some point they'll need our help, we'll be glad to reciprocate and help them back. 509,000 people watching us live. This is a new record. We crossed 500,000. Our next goal is 1 million. I understand it's twice more and it sounds kind of unreal, but let's try. Now imagine our viewers, there'll be one day when there'll be just one word. You turn in and I'll say Mark, victory. So people, not to miss such a day, please come and watch us over and over again. Because that would be a pretty cool thing to be watching us live on Feygin live when such a day comes. And it's also quite a joyful thing. All right, we have a few more things we wanted to address, but not ask Olexiy now. We also have our time frames. So again, please share, subscribe to us, share in the social media. If you watch it in English, subscribe to the Privateer station. We'll try to catch up with all of these broadcasts. And, of course, to Feygin Live and Olexiy Arestovych channels. And tomorrow, if we have time, we will announce that NFT thing to support the stamp that Ukrainian government released lately. By the way, Mark, you will have that stamp. Ooh, amazing. Everyone is saying, but I haven't seen it yet. You'll have a personal stamp, and it'll be signed by a soldier who said that. Who sent Russian military ship, go fuck yourself. This is our logo of Privateer Station, by the way. So, anyway, I'll see you tomorrow.